and welcome to the Unstuck podcast. I'm Heather,
I'm Cameron.
and you might be noticing that we're missing like a key figure in our podcast today. The car seat. It's gone. Um, and for those of you listening on our podcast stations without video, is that what they're called? Podcast stations?
No,
Podcast outlets?
it's just a podcast.
If you're listening on a podcast that's not YouTube, we're always in our car, and our baby's car seats always like front and center. But we found the coolest little gadget. It's like a vest that you put on the baby. She's not a baby; she's 4. But you put it on, and it basically has like a harness that has like a strap up here where you buckle in the regular seat strap, so it holds it in place, and then it also goes around across her lap and holds the regular seat belt in place, and so it gives a lot more room in the car. And we've got 5 kids, and this is a 7-seater, so when we do any kind of trips, it's kind of squishy in the back, and so this will give a whole lot more room for our kids, because now we'll open up another captain chair for our older teenagers. Anyway, I don't know. We should probably put a link there so people know what we're talking about. It's cool. Like they're
Maybe they
like
have us on a
like we don't it's not like we get anything for this, but it's really cool. We're excited about it. So today we are talking about
it's something that we preface it. I'd like to talk about how when we're going to our therapist, we were chatting with him, and he's just said something really interesting, because I noticed he naturally, as he was speaking, would and I don't think he did it without thought. Excuse me, I don't think he did it by thinking about it very much. I think he would talk about the person and the relationship as if they're 2 different things. And I thought that was really interesting.
What he was saying was that when he has couples come in, he's not their therapist; he's the therapist for the relationship.
Right. And so that's what he says, that the client is the relationship.
So if one of the people coming in, one of the spouses, is hurting his client, he will speak up in defense of the client, which enables him to kind of call people out on behavior. I think he didn't say that directly, but I think it enables him to say, hey, the way you're showing up here is actually hurting this relationship,
which is my client,
and I need to address this because it's being damaged, and I'm here in defense of the relationship.
And I just thought that was really interesting. I think I like that.
Well, it's something too. I think the reason why you really like it is that we've talked a lot about how you and I are not the relationship. We have this thing that we are creating together that's separate from us.
Yes.
And so when our therapist said that, it was something that resonated on that level, because we've been talking a lot about this between you and I.
Yeah.
So it kind of opens up the discussion for something called differentiation, which is what we've been studying a lot about over the past year or so, and what that actually means in our lives. Differentiation is where you exist outside of anybody else's opinions or feelings, and you create your own sense of safety, basically, that you're not relying on somebody else to show up a certain way so you can be okay, or somebody else can do something, to you, and maybe even infringe upon your rights or your agency as a human being, but that they don't, that you still exist outside of that, and you still have your own choices on how you want to show up in life, how you want to feel, and how you want to allow others to affect you.
Maybe explain why would you want to do that? Why is the relationship not me? It affects me, so why is it not also something that is me?
I think it puts you in a perpetual state of victimhood, because you're now at the whim of the people in your life where you give that power to, because basically it's a choice. You're giving your power away to somebody else by allowing them to be able to affect you that way. Now, it's tricky. So we can do this, I think, and I think a lot of us do anyway, with people around us, right? You might have coworkers, you might have people in your neighborhood, your church, whatever, that you are frustrated by, you don't like how they show up, and you just kind of you place a wall there of separation, and you're like, you don't affect me. sometimes we let them affect us. Sometimes we let that cross. But I think in certain ways, especially if they don't matter that much to us, we can differentiate really easy. Like you're
And I
just
think,
kind of crazy over there doing your
yeah,
thing. You don't really affect me, but I don't know what you're doing. Like it's just over there.
yeah. I think that most people can understand and um, put like something like a job that they differentiate with pretty well. Like I don't think most people consider themselves their job. I
Mm.
think they see it as something separate that they do. I think because we look at the utility of a job so clearly, unless you really are doing something that you're passionate about, which I applaud you for, that's great. You should do that. But even then, I think you should see it separately. And it's easier for most of us to look at our job as something separate from us. I'm not my job. My job is something I work
And
on,
then
something I do, something that affects me, but I'm not my job.
I think that's a healthy way of being. A lot of people though do let the job come home and be part of their lives
Right.
and over obsessed, but then you're out of balance. I think it's probably a really great way to describe this because
Yeah.
when people have the job show up as that important in their life and they can't separate from it, then it's very easy to identify that they're out of balance. So then they need to have some proper boundaries with work. It's not their whole life. It's not who they are. Other things are important. But relationships are a little bit muddier because we make them that way. Um, and I think it's important to talk about that, especially in a marriage, when you are building this thing together, um, this entity called marriage, this relationship, something you do could damage that because you have your own free will and choice.
Right.
Um, Something I do can damage that, and because I am investing a large part of my being into creating this relationship, that can hurt. That can make me. I don't like using the word make. That can cause sadness. That can cause anger. It can cause hurt, frustration.
You
All of
just
those
said
things.
investing my being. What do you mean by that? Isn't that me making it my
I
identity?
probably misspoke a little bit. I'm investing a lot of myself, right? Um, I mean, I think that we invest ourselves in many things. There's nothing
Sure.
wrong with that. So I'm investing my time, my energy, my heart, my hopes, my dreams into this because I'm not going somewhere else. I'm saying this is the vehicle that I want to express some of these things, these desires of mine. So I'm going to invest my time and my energy, my heart into what we're creating here because that's where I want it. I want it. I want this relationship that we're building to build what I want, right?
Yeah.
And so I am invested, you know.
So that raises a question with me. How do you not? So it affects you, right? So how do you approach it when there's something that's harming the entity of relationship, that's harming your relationship? How do you approach it in a way that it's not about you? How do you approach it in a way that is empowering?
I think that's probably a struggle that's going to be felt and experienced our whole lives, because our emotions are all entangled in it because we have investment in these relationships that we're building. But I think the healthiest way we can go about it is to when we step outside of victimhood. And it's not like you're hurting me or you're the one doing this, you're responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for my own happiness. Now, I might have a challenge where I have to choose happiness. It doesn't just come to me easily. There's plenty of things that you and I do together that just easily bring happiness. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And that's not really a choice. You just kind of fall into it because you're happy. We're on the same page. We're doing things we both enjoy. We're feeling fulfilled. Happiness comes. It's not something I have to choose. But when something's difficult, I have to then choose, say, I'm in charge of my own happiness. I'm not excited that things are going this way. I wish things would be different, but I get to choose how I feel about it. I get to choose how I experience life. You are not the one that's dictating how I feel. Um, I think some of the best examples of this are, Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and his decision to not allow the Nazis to affect, like, own his choices, to not be a victim to them. He realized early on that the one thing they couldn't take were his thoughts and how he chose to be, and he survived incredible, like horrific things that we don't even, I don't even think we can imagine, that he managed to figure out how to choose how he felt instead of allow himself to be a victim to his circumstances. We all will have circumstances that we are a victim to, that other people's choices affect, what we would like to have happen in our life. I mean, there's no getting around it. This is our human experience. We have, their life is fleeting. People are born and people die. Like we can't control these things, but we can control living now. Like when I get into, like we just heard some news about a family that we know who's going to be losing a child soon, and it hit me really hard. And I have like tendencies to go back into moments where I feel like, well, what's the point of trying? You can't control anything, right? Like, one of my kids can just die tomorrow. You can just die tomorrow. And you said something, how did you put it? You said like, but you're killing yourself right now. Or how did you put it?
By taking that stand, you're just producing the mourning ahead of time that you will still have to go through.
If it happens.
If it happens.
It's like I'm almost it's like I'm guaranteeing it by mourning it as if it happened now, and it never even did. And I think
not just guaranteeing it, you're going through unnecessary mourning that will still not save you from mourning in the future, as if you're I think sometimes we do these things because it's like, maybe if I do it now, I won't have to experience it later. I don't think it works that way.
Very unconscious thought, but I think that's what we do a lot.
I don't think it works that way. I think you will just simply you're just
not living now.
No,
you're not experiencing the full amount of joy. I think what it is like if we really experience the joy, then there'll be that much hurt if it's taken away. So we stop ourselves from really experiencing the joy of having and loving and all of these things that we fear can be taken away. And if we don't have enough joy in it, then it won't hurt as bad if it's taken away. And I don't think that's true, because the very fact that you're like preventing it by like not having joy now means you already love, you already want, you already care enough that it's affecting you. And I think it's important, like don't mourn before you have to mourn, and really embrace and be grateful for every second. And then if and when, or we go through these hard things, because all of us will. Death is part of all of our experiences. Loss is part of our experience. No one gets through this life without those things. The only one who, well, no, I was going to say the only one who didn't was Christ, but I'm like, no, he went through some of the very hardest things ever for us, and he still experienced death. So, I mean, it's not something we get out of. No amount of perfection or goodness or righteousness is going to remove loss and going through some of these mortal experiences that we're meant to have to help us build character, to help us learn how to be more like God. But anyway, you asked me a minute ago about like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And as you asked that, I was thinking about yesterday when I had a hard moment, and I had like a trigger come up where like I had a lot of fear and anxiety pop up. And sometimes that happens for me. As you know, with our story, like Cameron hid pornography addiction for me for 18 years. And I never thought before to be suspicious ever. And so now like, it comes unwittingly. Like if there's ever like a little thing that's said or something that doesn't make sense, it's like my spidey senses are just on alert constantly. So it's like, oh, that didn't make sense. That must mean something wrong. And then logic, like if I take a step back and look at it from a like a wider lens, it's like, okay,
rational.
Like that's really not something, I mean, that's not like a red flag. It's just something that doesn't make sense. But because I was so shocked by it, I think it's like, it's our body's like mechanism to protect ourselves. When I found out about it, it was so disorienting to me that I felt so much fear and like just surprise, like how could I not know? And I think like I trained my body to say, when things don't make sense, you're in danger. And so my body is responding as such. It's saying, this is danger. And it takes a lot of consciousness to like talk myself through that and walk out of it. And sometimes I don't do that. Sometimes I allow the fear to fester, and then it'll sometimes end up in an argument, or not an argument, but me basically like really choosing into some negative energy and fears. And like in the past, this hasn't happened recently, but I would even make accusations, right? And like it's almost like I'm preemptively finding out new things just to protect myself, like what we're talking about. But yesterday I had one of those moments where I was like feeling it, and I was recognizing like, okay, take a step back. Like this doesn't mean anything. You know, I was going through like all the feelings, but I could understand like this doesn't mean anything. Like this is what you're doing, but it still produced those feelings. And I think what I did differently than I have before, I think I've done this before, but differently than when it ends not well, is that I just kind of humbly went to you and I said, like, I struggle sometimes with those feelings, and they don't come as like a slap in the face. I'm not looking for them. I don't want them. I wish I didn't have them. I mourn the time when I didn't have those because it was easier. I'm grateful for all we have and all we built and where we're at now because we're in a better, healthier place. But I still mourn the fact that they had to happen. Like this has to be something that I even think about. I don't love that. And it makes me scared sometimes. And I just said, I'm sorry. I know that's probably really hard. You're not doing anything wrong. What you did wasn't wrong. There's nothing you did that was even like worthy of suspicion, but I'm still reacting that way and I'm sorry. And I'm struggling with it right now. And I didn't make it about you doing something wrong. I owned my own choices in it.
This is really good for our conversation. But I think we both handled it pretty well. You were recognizing it outside of the reaction you were having
while feeling it.
Right.
Because I didn't like the feeling didn't go away for me. And I was still feeling it.
And I do remember listen, this is a time where I did it well, but I remember reacting outside of it, understanding that it was that she was looking at your vulnerability and accepting the vulnerability, and also showing compassion and love, increasing love and compassion.
Because I wasn't going to do any good to like make it about him and tell him he did something wrong and punish him again. But what ended up happening was like you came over to me a little bit later, you gave me a hug, and like you gave me a little bit of space to just be sad and work through it for a second. And then you told me like sincerely that you were sorry, you know, that was the case. And I think like it ended up, I think when I would react in ways that were unhealthy before, I think I wanted the sorry. I wanted the acknowledgement because I was hurting, right? And by doing it this way, it was a way better experience in terms of like you understood that your actions contributed to my feelings, and I was still owning that this is my job and I played a part in creating these feelings because I had insecurities that were affected by it. Like those were things I have to own.
Because my actions had damaged the client of relationship, and I know that. And so that's what. And when I said sorry, that's what I was saying sorry to. What was happening at the moment, there was nothing to say sorry.
Yeah, he didn't do anything wrong. It was that his actions had.
But I know that my action had damaged our relationship, and so that's what I was addressing. And I think that is the way to approach it. If you can get the mindset and the framing that you're both as a team are working on this thing called relationship, that's called love, that's called marriage, that's called whatever you're working on.
You're both fighting for the same thing. You don't need to be like enemies. You get to be teammates.
Right.
And I think what was interesting too is that I watched the feelings dissipate like pretty quickly. And I actually was wondering, and I haven't asked you this yet, but like because I felt super vulnerable, like because in the past what I would do would be like I'd ask questions to itch at the anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I'd ask questions like to dig and to find out. And instead I just was vulnerable and said, hey, this is what I'm experiencing right now. And I'm sorry. I wish I wasn't. And I'm feeling sad because I wish I didn't have to do this right now. I was just completely vulnerable and honest with where I was instead of like itching at the scratch, like itching the scratch that would lead it to feel worse. Like, especially in those moments when there's anxiety or fear around it. Like, if I start asking questions about like maybe things that had happened or details of things, like it just makes it worse because now I'm like, oh, I'm even more of a victim. Look, how could you do that to me? Right? I would build that story. Instead, I just made it about me, and I said, this is my experience, and I didn't blame him. I expressed my sadness. Like, in a way, I kind of I did share that like your actions have made it hard for me, but not in a shaming or a
Yes.
angry or a, you're the one to blame for this. It was more like, I'm experiencing this because our relationship was damaged in this way, and you contributed. So it was just this honesty. And so I was wondering, like, that must be what it felt like to dissipate, because like you talked about how being honest, radically honest and open with me is part of what helped dissipate the desire to itch your to scratch your itch, right, with pornography. Like, it became a lot easier to tolerate the temptations by being honest and just sharing what you were experiencing and the feelings. And if they come up, like talking about it with me. And I actually felt that dissipation in myself the other day, because I think I have my own like addiction of um like when I'm feeling anxious, like to soothe is like I need to know everything, right? I need to ask all these questions. I need to make sure I'm safe. I need to like get some control back. And so I will addictively seek after that to my own detriment. And I watch that as I change the habit up, and I just shared what I was feeling exactly as I was feeling and didn't ask questions that itched, scratched that itch. Um, that the feelings dissipated pretty quickly. Like, I was able to move out of it. In fact, by the end of, like, it was only what,
It's like you
maybe
changed.
half hour, 45 minutes or so, like, where I was just kind of like struggling a little bit of a funk. And then we moved on with our evening and had a good rest of the evening. Like, it wasn't affecting me. By the time we went to bed, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore.
Yeah. Well, it went from, I'm trying to think of the best way to word it. It was, you went from maybe accusing or offensively trying to express your feelings to just simply
Like
expressing
being
it.
offensive,
Yeah,
not being
offensive.
Yeah.
Being on the offense, you were just expressing. You're
Yeah.
just being vulnerable. You're just opening up and expressing to be seen. And I think by doing that, I think you just hit on one of the biggest keys. When you're working on your relationship, if you're just expressing and you're opening up to be seen, and with the key understanding that how somebody shows up afterwards doesn't, it matters in that, like, you hope that they're gonna show up the way you want, but if they don't show up the way you want, it still doesn't matter. It still isn't the thing that you're still in control of how you're influencing and how you are enticing the betterment of the relationship, the thing you're working on. It's still not up to you to make them show up. But by just expressing and being seen, I think it gives much more space. If you just come on the offense, I now have to defend. Or at least I will be tempted to defend. I don't have to. I could still just dissipate that myself. I have that choice. But it does make it more likely that instead of actually working on something, I'm now on defensive.
Well, and you actually have been really good about not being on the offensive and allowing me to process, but then I had to come to terms with when I have these episodes, and they don't happen all the time. They're just like, it's literally, like I said, a slap in the face. I was reading a comment online by somebody whose husband revealed, or they found out about it. Same type of thing, like how it's like they're like, no matter how much progress they make, it's like sometimes a slap in the face, and that just happens every once in a while. And and what you've been doing is like allowing me to express that, but I had to come to terms with the fact that if I do this angrily, and if I do this as a victim, and I make you my enemy all over again, then I'm doing damage to this relationship that I'm building. And I can't, like, it's actually the most unsafe thing that I can be doing, because when I'm fighting like that, I'm trying to protect myself. I'm trying to protect our marriage. I'm trying to, like, it makes no sense logically, but it's essentially like I'm scared, I'm fighting to make sure I can keep and I don't lose
It's
anymore.
interesting you said protecting marriage and yourself. I think what happened there is just like we talked about in the beginning. You're entangling
Yeah, I'm
yourself with the
entangling myself
relationship.
with the marriage.
So you thinking you are equating protecting yourself and the marriage as the same thing when it's really a separate.
Yeah.
When it's that mode. And I think what's interesting is we actually have another podcast about bitterness that I would go watch, but I think when we talk a lot about this, I really think eliminating bitterness, eliminating the desire and the license to think that you have a right to express bitterness, to express anger, or a way of multiplying somebody's hurt and expressing bitterness. Really, I think when you can eliminate
you hurt
that,
me, I have the right to do this right now.
right?
If you're hurting, that's okay
If you
because you
really
hurt me.
pull back from that and just cut that out, it gives you space to just express, and it gives them space to react
And
in a
if
way
you,
that they can.
and if you really feel that way, then you might not need to it's not going down that road actually isn't going to help. You need to re-examine, do you want to be in this relationship? Because if that's really how you're showing up is like, yeah, I have a right to hurt you because you hurt me, then you're not building anything right now.
No.
You're just damaging more and more. And the real question shouldn't be, I have the right to do it, or like, don't tell me I don't, or whatever. It really should be like, do we both want this still?
Yeah.
And if you do, then doing that does not help.
No.
And like we actually had a conversation the other day because I was telling him, I'm like, sometimes it feels like I just like I don't know what I'm doing. And I like it feels like it's almost like you can only hold so much in your cup, and then like when it bubbles up and overflows, like it's like you just can't help it. Like you have no more capacity or tools to like not explode or not have it, burst over the top. That's at least the imagery that I have. And I think something that's really important is like if you find yourself there where it's bubbling over and you don't have the tools or the capacity to like to calm yourself anymore. And I hope this makes sense because I think we have a capacity. It's just when we like get overdone.
It's when you move to an
we
irrational
don't.
space. It's when you're
Yes,
not able
but
to think.
but it's because but at least for me, it feels like it's because I haven't taken care of myself and I don't have any more capacity left. It's like you're just tired and you're done and you can't. You kind of like a child who's overtired, right? Like at the end of the day, if you have a toddler that hasn't napped and they're exhausted, they're gonna have tantrums like left and right because they don't have any more. They've lost all the strength to rein it in, right? And I don't know. I still feel like that some nights. Like when I'm exhausted, I've had a long day and I'm ready for bed. Like my tolerance level is just not what it usually is when I am in a better space. And so what I found is that like when I'm bubbling over like that and I don't have the tools anymore, I'm not doing enough to self-care. And like just taking a step back and recognize like what do I need? What do I need to do to help myself so that I have the tools ready and I'm not overexhausted when the triggers come up. And then we had a conversation about how like ways that you could help me through that if I'm in that space. And we talked a lot about like agreeing to walk away from the argument, walk away, take a breather before continuing.
We say walk away. I'm talking about a specified break, like 10 minutes. That's not walking away.
It's not avoidance. We're
Right.
talking about if we're heated, it's a chance to take a breather, to get in our right head and space, because that's usually what happens. Like after the fight, I'll come down and then I'll recognize like, it's not what I wanted to be. I am sorry. I didn't show up the way I wanted to. It's kind of giving yourself that.
You actually might have something really valid, but you're not actually addressing it because when you get to that, I call it nasty town, where it's irrational. It's more about bitterness than it is about actually working on the relationship.
You might have a point that's needed to talk about, but if you're in that energy, it doesn't matter what happens because it's not gonna.
No.
You're not gonna be able to actually resolve in a way that's helpful. We talked. I thought, and I haven't done this yet, but one of the tools that I want to do is in my right frame of mind, write myself a letter that says, Heather, I know that you are struggling right now, and I know you feel really scared, and I know X, Y, and Z. I remember that. But right now, I also want you to remember that you feel so much happiness and joy. You know, you are in a good path. Things are healthy. Like whatever I need to hear. And to have a letter that I know I can pick up and when I'm in that space, and that's just what I do. No matter how much I don't want to do it, because I guarantee you I won't want to do it. When I'm in that space, I will not want to pull that out. I'll be frustrated by it. But if I can remind myself of how I want to be, and I can remind myself that it doesn't matter whatever he's done. He could like turn around and lie again and be do all kinds of things. If I don't show up in a way that I can respect myself for, then I've lost. Doesn't matter what he's done. I've already lost. So remind myself of who I want to be in these moments and what's true and what's important, and to have that as a go-to when I need that space, when we need to take a step or a breather before continuing. Um, I also like I think what really helps me too is music that I've connected with where I can feel especially connected with God. And remind myself how much God loves me. No matter what's going on in my world, no matter how scared I am, no matter who's hurting me, or maybe, maybe someone's hurting me deliberately, but I'm important to God. And remembering those times where I felt that, and then music can connect that feeling really powerfully. And so having that as a go-to to help. I think just whatever it is for you, grounding yourself and like resetting, so that you don't harm the relationship, because no matter what someone's done, if you want to build it and you want to make it better and you want um to build something, like if it's worth it to you, then your actions matter as you're working on building it. What you bring to the table is either going to build or destroy, and you get to choose, no matter how anyone else shows up. So anyway, it's about that time, I think, to wrap things up.
Yeah.
Um, I think, any kind of uh self like study and reflection on what it means to differentiate yourself and how you are separate uh from the relationship that you're building, I think is a really helpful thing to do. And Jennifer Finlayson Fife, she's got a free podcast. It's called Conversations with Dr. Jennifer, I think. On all the major podcast platforms. She talks a lot about differentiation. You can probably do a search for it. She's really, really great to listen to. She's helped us with understanding this concept a lot. But just, remember, it's not the relationship isn't you, but you make the relationship. And that's, it's really important that we don't entangle ourselves. And the moment we entangle ourselves, it gets hard.
And I think it's also really helpful to recognize the people that are part of your relationship. They're on your team. They're also not making up the relationship. Heather's not marriage. I'm not marriage. Marriage is a thing we're working on. And I think when we frame it that way, we work as a team and we approach it as a team, then it makes it easier for me to separate myself from it. It makes it easier for me to not take things personal when I'm not feeling like she's not showing up the way I desire.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. We hope you have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.